Our sports director, Adam Chalifoux, joins us live from the Fargo Dome. It's 35-32 right now. NDSU has the lead. About 3 minutes to go left until the end of the game. Adam, talk about the atmosphere at the Fargo Dome and kind of tell us what's going on over there.
Well, I'm sure you can hear it behind me, homie, but it's loud. And there's just under 1:30 left in the game right now. Incarnate Word is trying to string a drive together, and Lindsey Scott just broke loose, throws a deep ball, and it is intercepted by NDSU, and that should just about do it. It looks like the Bison, barring a mishap, are going to be headed back to Frisco. This place is getting loud, and what a game it has been. Lindsey Scott, who's been about perfect all year, forced plenty of mistakes tonight, and Cole Green just came up huge with the play of the season as Scott escapes the pocket, lets it rip deep, and let's see who came away with that pick there, going upstairs for it, and it's Dawson Weber. He's played lights out. He's getting my game ball.
NDSU has been favored throughout the playoffs, and they are 3.5-point underdogs coming into this game. How do you think that will factor into Sunday's marquee matchup?
Well, the last time they were actually an underdog was against Sam Houston back in 2011, way back when they're winning that first FCS national championship. And so it's kind of foreign territory at that point. That being said, it's definitely some chalkboard material for a team that's used to being favored to win these games. And there's so many different motivational factors, but you really don't need to poke the bear. We've learned that throughout these playoffs, and we saw it with the Montana Grizzlies in that game. They literally, the Bears should know better than to poke themselves, but the Bison don't need to be poked. And I actually asked Michael Tutsi the same question, so here's what he had to say about it.
Whenever you're an underdog.
What extra weight does playing against South Dakota State add this year?
Well, honestly, Hami, I think it adds extra weight for both teams. And if you think about the stage, you think about the rivalry, and you think about the context, NDSU losing a close one in which they had a pretty good lead going into the half last time back in Fargo, it really can't get any bigger. I'm going to go ahead and call this the biggest game in the history of the FCS and the biggest game in the history of both of these programs. This rivalry turns 120 years old this year, and geez, if the weight couldn't be any bigger, I just don't know how it could be. And so when you add all that context and you think about how badly NDSU wants to take down the Jacks, they've lost their last 3 matchups against this team, and you think about how badly SDSU, who went to the national championship in the year 2020, wants to get that first trophy and the confidence that they may have having beaten the Bison in their last 3 matchups, it's huge for both teams. And I talked to Javier Darrett, and I asked him that same question earlier today. Here's what Javier had to say about it. Well, Hami, I'm suspicious that SDSU took a good look at the skeleton that NDSU has built, and they looked at what's worked for them. And both of these teams, it's no mistake, are extremely strong up front on both sides of the ball. They win the battle of the trenches, they outlast their teams, and their conditioning winds up being a massive factor. And so you look at what SDSU did, and they kind of took that blueprint from NDSU, and then they applied it to beat NDSU at their own game. They were more physical. And you look at the second half in particular, NDSU might have rested on their laurels. You think about that late interception in the second quarter, and then SDSU gets that. They are, down 21-7 instead of, being on their deathbed there. They have a little chance to breathe, and then they're able to rally, and they're able to run the ball all over NDSU and control the game, control the clock in the second half. And NDSU really had a hard time tackling the ball carrier. And that's uncharacteristic historically of NDSU when you think about the program. But this season, they had a lot of trouble stopping the run in the first half of the year. And really that SDSU game was a massive turning point. And, Cam Miller said after that game that, hey, you look at when we lost to NDSU the year before, and we were a better team after that. And I believe that the team feels that same way, that they gained a lot from that loss. I think that they used it as fuel. They used it as motivation. And while it's not necessarily a focal point in their preparation, I'm sure it's in their back of their minds. But when I talked to Coach Entz about that earlier today, he said that they actually don't want to focus too much on what happened in October and instead focus on the new game. And so here's what Coach Entz had to say.
We haven't talked about it.
From Scruffy Duffy's in Frisco, Texas. Adam, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Hami. It's a beautiful night here in Frisco, and it sounds like it's really cold there. It's a lot nicer. I don't have a meteorologist like Brian with me here, but I bet it's about 58 degrees. It's not too bad. It's not even jacket weather, depending on how thick your skin is, but you know, we got them pretty thick here in Fargo. We're used to those negative temperatures, so it's a pretty nice night, having a good time. And as you can see, a lot of fans behind me making some noise. They're pumped. We got SDSU and NDSU represented behind me.
You are at Scruffy Duffy's, a lot of NDSU fans over there. Now, the last time that these two teams had met, North Dakota State, they lost in a close game to SDSU, and it looks like SDSU made a kind of a comeback there. But let's get into the matchup itself and some of your keys to the game for tomorrow. What do you think is the most important factor for a Bison victory?
That's a great question, Hami. I think the most important factor of this matchup is simply going to come down to the battle in the trenches. And when you look at the way that South Dakota State was built, I think that we're literally built to beat the Bison. You're looking at the nation's #1 run defense. They allow 83 yards per game on average versus the #1 rushing offense, 273 yards on the ground for NDSU per game. And both these teams have a great defensive line when it comes to attacking the quarterback as well. They both actually have exactly 38 sacks each coming into this game. And so it's going to be a battle of the trenches. Who could be more physical, who's got better conditioning, and who can outwear their opponent. It's going to be a long game. Here's what Coach Entz had to say about the importance of the line play on both sides.
I think that is the outcome of the game. It's probably.
Well, it's really going to come down to fundamental football. You know what they say, the low man always wins. They got to swarm the ball. But the thing is, it's been a work in progress all season. The last game against the Jacks was a big learning point for this team as they learned a lot about themselves and trying to look to turn those weaknesses into strengths. And that's something that they feel they've done. Here's what a few of the players had to say about that.
Throughout the year, we just continue to get better.
What are your next keys to this coming game?
Well, you know, it's going to come down to short yardage situations. It's going to come down to the red zone. Check out this stat bomb, Hami. SDSU scores 97% of the time when they get in the red zone. That is the best in the nation, as you would imagine. NDSU, though, not far behind at 91%. And so it really ties back into what we talked about earlier with the run defense and the play of both offensive and defensive line. North Dakota State needs to be more physical, and they need to win those battles in the trenches, especially when you talk about the red zone against the most efficient red zone offense in the country that the Jacks are bringing into Toyota Stadium tomorrow. And so I think it really just comes down to those short yardage situations and being the more physical team down there. Here's what Entz had to say about that and stopping the run.
We're going to have to play really well in the red zone.